this month, two topics. I hurt my knee 15 years ago, and every so often it goes out, sort of thing. It's not the knee, it's like a ligament, it's one of the attachment points or something. Now, I've had this knee, which has been a problem for 15 years, only goes out once a year or twice a year, or in a really bad year, three times a year. And it may recover within a couple of hours in the best case. It takes 4 days in the worst case before I'm ambulatory, before I can walk. So most of my students are aware that I've got this problem, and most of my students are very kind. They are forgiving. They are happy to learn even when I'm not teaching physically. So I've taught sitting down a couple of times. I don't like it. It's not my style, but I've done that. And it just got me thinking, well, especially because I'm sure we've all seen by now the terrible adverts on Facebook and other places on the internet of the take up Tai Chi and you can be a ripped, muscular super person in, I think, sort of 3 weeks flat or something. So, on one hand, you've got old farts like me. On the other hand, you've got people who make exorbitant claims about the health and wellness benefits of Tai Chi, and B, I think this is fair, like to project an image of invincibility to their students. So that's the background. That's what I'm thinking about. I just wondered if anybody had any thoughts, comments.
Yeah. Can I start?
Please.
Yeah. Well, I've been with different instructors, and in general, I'm very impressed by their attitude. I've got one instructor who he cancels classes when he's unwell, or if he's able to run them, he slightly modifies the content, but he freely talks if he's got health problems, and he's very, very sensitive to his students if they've got health problems. Now, as well as running the slightly more martial classes, he runs classes for people with health groups. So he's generally pretty good. Now, I don't. His name is Ken Mead. He's a member of an organisation called Zongding, not John Ding. It's a Malaysian thing, but he's pretty good. Now, I've got another instructor who's deals with things in a slightly different way because they've got very good backup from senior students who can fill in, if necessary, and also communicate very well on health issues. I think students tend to be fairly appreciative, if things are explained to them. So that's my general feeling. I've got a couple of other um, people I train with, and they're just very open with each other. So I think if the instructors are open with uh, the students tend, my feeling is they tend to pick up on that and make allowances, just as the instructors should do for who they're dealing with. So I think it's a sort of two-way process. And in my experience, I've been to one or two different instructors, and things generally work quite well.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Ken, can I come to you? Because I know you've posted on Facebook, so I don't suppose you consider it a secret. You had some major health challenges, I believe is the pretty word for it. How did your students relate to what was going on with you, if you don't mind me asking?
In 2009, gosh, it's been a long time. I was coughing up blood for months. I had had three atrial fibrillation procedures, and the last one closed down my pulmonary veins from the left lung to the heart. So I've been working with one lung since that time. But finally, they sent me to Cleveland Clinic and tried to stent my left pulmonary vein. They tore the vein off and pierced my heart with the wire. And I was in intensive care on a ventilator for 2 weeks. Couldn't even lift myself to go to the bathroom. It's very degrading. Uh, but I wrote about it because it's the journey that I'm interested in. I want to know what people have gone through, and so I wrote about it on my blog, and I guess on Facebook at that time it was out, and just kind of stayed with it over time. And I think it has inspired people because I didn't give up martial arts. I still try to improve. Um, I had one email from, and I've had more than one, but one guy emailed me and said he was in the hospital with a horrible situation, and he thought about my story, and if I could get through it, so could he. And so that gave him a little motivation. So I think it's important. My students have watched me grow old. I was really strong in my 40s when I met the two that I have still. I don't try to get local students anymore, but yeah, it's fine. I'm not a warrior anymore. I'm a coach. I'm a teacher. I was a warrior teacher when I met them, and they watched it happen. And I don't know. They don't mind, and I don't mind either. When my teacher is sick, I study with Nabil Raneh, a disciple of Chen Yu in Germany. And when he's sick, I say, "Hey, take care of yourself. Don't worry about us." So I think that's a general idea people have.
Can I ask, has anybody come across the opposites of that? Has anybody come across either students that are not happy when you're unwell, or have you come across other instructors who do like to give a feeling of sort of superiority, invincibility to their students? I mean,
No,
it's a non-issue.
no, no. And it may be something to do with Tai Chi. Tai Chi people are very giving. Um, that's. I mean, I'm not an instructor, but my feeling is they're so giving. I mean, when I took up Tai Chi, it was basically because I'd broken my arm. I was a couch potato for 6 months, and I thought, stuff this. I want to do something, and it was just welcoming. I my experience is most of the people that I meet in Tai Chi are there's something um, good about them. I know we've all got egos and stuff like that, but I think there's something about Tai Chi people that there's a gentleness underlying it all, and they're willing to share. That's just me. This is my feeling.
No, thank you for that. Um, Russ,
For,
yes. Oh, sorry,
yeah.
Robert. Robert and Russ both went like that at the same time. I'll come to you first, Russ, if I'm.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just say, like, first of all, touch wood. I, tend to have fairly decent health, and my while my joints are starting to fade, sure, it's nothing that's really impacting my teaching. But like there was one time when I traveled, I got a little run down, and it manifested itself in kind of like making my voice a lot deeper. And people picked up on that. They're going like, are you sick?" and so they were concerned about that because for whatever reason, Colorado seems to be one of the petri dishes for, whatever virus, bug, anything that's going around the United States. We're always the first one to go bright red. So, and again, with good reason. So, I fortunately have not had to cancel any classes just due to my own health. One thing that your story kind of reminded me of is like I teach some classes through the YMCA, and the YMCA seriously frowns on canceling any class, so you get a substitute. And so one time when I was traveling and I had a substitute, well, this girl, bless her heart, like wrecked her knee the day before. And so she came in. She's, like one of the more prolific teachers throughout the YMCA system here in Colorado Springs. And she went in and taught sitting down with her leg in a, big boot. And the people respected that. I think it lends some just towards, the resilience we're trying to build through our practices. So, yeah, just to close that out, I mean, I find that most of my students are very respectful and that they'll, shoot me an email and saying like, I've got what's going around. I'm not going to be in class today, and so for the most part, I don't have that problem that, like when I'm teaching at the YMCA, I don't have a lot of control. If someone shows up, I can't go like, you get out of here. You're obviously sick. But again, I don't, I tend to not have that problem. Like say most of the time when people know they're not feeling well, know they're under the weather, they just stay home.
I think
So
maybe that's something that COVID has actually improved, the fact that people are aware that diseases are communicable. Whereas maybe before COVID, there may have been people who kind of went, oh, it's only a sniffle. I'll go and breathe over
mhm.
everybody.
Yeah,
Robert
now you don't.
wanted to come in with a comment.
Yeah, pretty much every teacher I've had was very honest about his or her limitations and often used them for showing us, giving us more information about ourselves and how to heal and how to deal with injuries, how to deal with conditions. And pretty much every teacher I've had was very into discussing health issues in a way which brought themselves in, but also were was had no reservation about talking about their own. And I'm the same way. I tell my students because I think it's a good example of what how to deal with things, and that everyone has issues of varying degrees. And at this point, my knees, pretty much all my joints are pretty bad. Excuse me. And I have to sit a lot in class and teach from sitting. My students are there because of what they can learn from me, not seeing me as a master or anything like that. They don't think that way. And I certainly don't lead them to think that way. I don't think of myself that way. I don't put any labels on myself other than I'm a teacher. I don't have any belief systems. If I'm wrong about something, I'm the first to admit it. I feel that's part of the educational process. And when I taught AP Physics, which was on a college level in high school, and I'd do a problem at the board and see a mistake, I would stop and turn to the class and say, there's a mistake here. Do you see what it is? And the class would become very alert. The energy of the class would increase. and all of us would try to think about what the mistake was. And the first question I'd ask was, how do I know there's a mistake, which is part of the process? And usually they didn't know how I knew there was a mistake. Then I would say to them, do you want to think about this some more, or should I tell you? And at a certain point, I would tell them where the mistake was. At that point, they would never, ever make that mistake again. And it was, to me, that was the highlight of the class, finding a mistake, because that's what you do. That's the process of learning. And mistakes are one of the best ways to learn. So I highlight mistakes. And if a student asked me, this must have been about 10, 15 years ago, are you 100% sure of what you say about expansive strength? Because I have this whole thing about it. And I told him, no, I'm not. Maybe 80, 90%, but I'm not 100% sure. And that was good for me, because that highlighted the fact that I need more work to do on that. And that's all I think about, is how much can I learn from my students, or being with them, or teaching them, and how much can I transfer to them, and the best way to do it. And that's all I care about. I don't care about what I look like. I'm not going to come in disheveled with holes in my pants and dirt, smelling bad. I mean, that's ridiculous. But whatever I am, and that's it. The students accept it, they don't. I don't worry about that at all.
It interests me, listening to the comments that have been made, and I appreciate the feedback on this idea. I do, as I say, when I posed that question, I did wonder if there were people who felt that as an instructor, you should be perfect. As an instructor, you should not show weakness. Sort of Karate Kid, whoever the bad guy was, kind of thing. That ages me. But I do wonder, actually, just listening to the comments, I wonder if, in a funny sort of way, the very definition of this kind of group actually attracts the kind of people that would say that kind of thing. And if the very definition of this group actually tends to put off people who do have that kind of, look at me, I am grand seafood, or Dai Seafood, Fred Blogs, whatever.
Well, I feel quite in harmony with what's just been said. It seems to me that this is the way I feel about things, and to be training with like-minded people, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Well,
by the way, sorry,
I think it kind of goes back to
recognize your fallibility, and to keep going and to keep giving. I think that's just something just great, and I think, as I say, I'm not an instructor, but I think if you can put these things over to students, they should be so grateful. They should say, thank you. Thank you very, very much, they should say.
Yes, Robert.
You attract, I find that you attract the kind of students that are, that have the same intellectual level, ethical level that you do. And teachers who don't have those qualities have students that are brutal. I've studied a number of different martial arts, different classes. There are a lot of students that want to fight with you, that don't want to hear what you have to say if you correct them or give them some information. and can hurt you, really hurt you. And I find that a good fraction of students of martial arts, and Tai Chi too, when I do push hands, I find most people are, not most, but a good fraction of people are just want to win. That's all they're interested in. They're not interested in learning. They're not interested in a mutual exchange and welcome you your presence with them as an opportunity for the two of us to progress. They don't feel that way about it. So I do disagree with Virginia a little bit on that subject, but the thing is, you attract the kind of students that have your mentality, and that's why you have to be careful with whom you study.
It kind of goes back to Ken's point, I think, of like, I'll speak for myself, 66 years old, aftermarket hip. My non-existent octagon days are over. Okay. I'm not going up against some 20 something and getting in there and trying to grapple with them. But at the same time, now going also to what Robert was just talking about as far as in push hands and things like that, you know, I I kind of say like, well, I'm kind of like Customato, you know. Customato couldn't beat up Mike Tyson, but Mike Tyson was better because of Customato. Okay. So, it was because of who he had training him that he was able to excel. And again, once they get to a certain point, I'll be more than happy to hand them off, to say, go see, someone else. And I've actually done that. I had a guy came in and he wanted something more physical than what I was offering. And I said, well, you want to go to the school down south. That guy's got great quals. I'd met the guy before, and he had really good qualifications. And so I said, that's probably more what you want because they had more of that, Wing Chun mixed martial arts, grappling and everything like that. And like I say, my grappling days are long since over, or my hip would like pop out of the socket or something.
Yeah, when I met my wife, I was teaching in my 40s. I was 49. She said I was a hard body. Now, if I'm a hard body, it's because rigor mortis is starting to set.
Yeah.
Yes,
Sorry.
John wants to jump in. John.
I was only going to say what Robert was saying about students who want to win. And I came across, when I first started learning, I came across a lot of those, especially with push hands. But the group that I've got now are more like a family. And if somebody turns up and doesn't fit in because they're being too aggressive or they don't last long. They very quickly, a few weeks, they'll just disappear because the rest of the class aren't compatible with them. And pushing hands, we call it sensing hands, just to get the idea over. But and they're all in terms of people being sick. I mean, as I say, they'll always ring me up or send me a WhatsApp message to say that they're not going to be there. So I've got a pretty good handle on that. I've actually been ill a couple of times. In 2010, I had bowel cancer, and it was. I think I missed one class, not through being macho because my daughter runs the class anyway if I'm not there. But it was a sort of Operation Monday, chuck you out Thursday kind of thing. And by the next week, I didn't feel too bad. So I said, I'll come along and observe. And I made a mistake. I couldn't observe, how can you? So I was in it that Wednesday night and I spent Thursday in bed because I was absolutely killed me. And the class are tolerant. More recently, a couple of years ago, I had heart failure. Probably still got it. Keep taking the pills, but I missed a few classes that time, but they were all fine with it. Nobody left, nobody wandered off. They were quite happy with my daughter running the class. The only thing was when I came back, I felt it had turned into Kung Fu Panda. They were playing music and all sorts of things I didn't used to do. But yeah, I think, as Robert said, you attract the students and keep the students that are compatible.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. Lee took the class on Monday, and one of my students sent an email saying, how good a teacher she was. Be nice to see you, but Lee was really good. Another student pretty much said the same thing, that Lee was good. On the other hand, talking about attracting the students, a few months ago, I have a habit of telling, Steve can probably remember back in the day, I have a habit of telling really bad jokes. And I told a bad joke that was, I don't mean bad rude, I mean, I tell those as well, but I just mean, like a really poor quality joke. And I apologized to the class. I said, no, that was bad even for me. And one of my students piped up and said, it's only for the humor that I come here, which, which I thought great. You're asking people, generally speaking, you're asking people to do two things, one of which is kind of important but not very important. That's to pay you money. By definition, most of the people that we have as students can probably afford to pay us the money that we charge for lessons. The thing that is way more important than that is our students give up their time that they absolutely could spend doing 100 different things, and they've chosen to come and train with each of us. And I think I've just come back, as I say, from a month in California, and I have trained with some people who end the class with 5 minutes of very California kind of chat. Some of you will know what I mean. Yeah, most of you, I think, know what I mean. Sort of all very mellow and thinking about yourself and your place in. I respect it. I just can't do it. They get the kind of students that want that kind of experience. I get the crazy people that want bad jokes. Robert probably gets people that actually, and Ken as well, because I know of both of them. They probably get the kind of students that actually want to learn proper Tai Chi. The rest of us, I don't know about, you see, so I'm not sure. I'm sure you're teaching proper Tai Chi as well, Russ. And of course, John, because I know who originally trained you, I'm sure you are. Steve, on the other hand, originally trained with me, and although he's trained with some really good people subsequently, I may
Well,
have.
I've got to, because of the humour, I have to share with you my best and worst Christmas cracker joke then, just to show that it still goes. And I agree, part of what we do is keeping people entertained as well as teaching them, but you've got to keep the smile on the face. And I just have to ask you, why was the Scarecrow awarded the Nobel Prize? He was outstanding in his field. So I'm just keeping it going for you, Robert.
Yes,
You have
yes,
to have this
yes.
level in there. I will go away and be quiet again for a little while.
Okay.
I'll just make one,
Yes, of
one
course you can, Virginia.
just one little comment, because it's come to me. When I started Tai Chi, and it was after an injury, but I'd done a few martial arts early on, and I'm not very strong, and I'm not very young, but I went in. I just wanted to whack and bash. I did. I wanted to whack and bash. And then Tai Chi's managed to get that out of me. That's great because uh, I'm a much happier person.
That's good. No, I mean, one of the things that I think is, and I'll come to you next, Keith. I see your hands raised. One of the things that I think is interesting about Tai Chi, and and I'm always very careful because I'm not convinced that when I say Tai Chi, it couldn't also be motor mechanics or basket weaving. But with Tai Chi, I think people that get deeply involved with it does help you develop as a person. I'm not going to necessarily say it helps you become a better person. That I will leave as an open question. But it definitely helps you become, I think, more introspective and maybe more forgiving of yourself. I'll come to you next, John. Keith, you've got your hand raised. Yes, Keith.
I find it very interesting that we share the same common knowledge of wanting to share our information. Firstly, I'd like to say hello to Russ because it's only recently I sent him a friend request and I think he had the courtesy to reply instead I said, go away. So that's the first thing. Teaching. I do apologize for missing the first few minutes. I was on another call. But I moved from the workshop floor to management one weekend in 1969. And in 1971, the shipyard that I was part of were building corvettes for a foreign nation, which I won't actually mention at the moment. And they said, we need you to teach, Keith, these engineers about the steering gear that we're providing. Now, I'd not really been involved in the steering gear. However, the first thing I did was introduce myself to what were 10 highly qualified naval engineers from this Navy. And I sat down and I chatted and chatted and chatted as one does, Robert. And at the end of the week, there was a vote by all these naval bods that were taking different things. So there was engineering, there was weapons, there's a whole range of things. And when they voted, they said, Keith, you come out on top because you don't talk down to people. You share what you're doing. I thought, oh, okay. So immediately I went away on a training course about basic educational and training techniques. Following that up, many years later, early in the 2000s, when I started teaching, I was at Epcot in Florida, is that? Yes, it is. Yeah. And there was this gentleman selling Chinese books, and I decided to buy one from YMAA. And he said, are you a teacher, Mr. Sharp? I said, well, sort of. I said, I've had about 1,000 people through my classes. Oh, he said, you must be a master. What? I said, I can't even master my own self. So that was a bit of a problem. So sharing. I found out over years of doing some it was introductory basic Tai Chi for many people, particularly over 50s and 60s, and identifying with somebody who has, I think it was Ken who said, you have a bit of difficulty moving around now. so I had people there and they said, what do you get out of Tai Chi, Keith? And I said, personally, a bit of well-being, but more importantly, seeing the joy on people's faces when they could move around a hall and actually bend or be flexible more than they fully expected. So I stopped using the term teacher. I stopped using the term trainer, and just said, I'm sharing what little information I have. And when I come on these programs and listen to Robert Chokra, and I think, well, I don't have the ability. I don't have the educational capabilities. What I do enjoy is seeing people get benefits from what we've done. And I know that everybody here has actually done whatever they can for the community. And I'm going to ask Mr. Robert Agar-Hutton if you'll do me a favor, please. And that is, I don't know what our colleagues around this particular Zoom class know, but we have now an organization called the Global expert advisory group. Many people may do it. Don't cover your face, John. So, and I'd like you to share that information because you've just met Roger Yanker, who's one of the main members of the team. And whether it works at the end of the day, I'm only sharing what I know. I'm not teaching grandmother how to suck eggs. So hopefully, and just seeing Robert there yesterday I was having a cup of coffee in a cafeteria, and there was a young lad, maybe 6 years old, and he was dropping his toys. And when he dropped his toys, he expected somebody else to pick them up. But his way of actually avoiding any eye contact was to place his hands over his eyes because he thought he was invisible then. So,
Aren't
John,
you?
you are not invisible.
Damn, I've been doing that for you.
That kind of segues into your topic number 2 that you had in your email of getting stuck. It's like now that I've transitioned more of my classes into like the YMCA, this group exercise format, if you will, um, you know, I run the risk of like the people that have been there with me 3, 4, 5 years, getting going like, oh, well, he's talking to the people that have been there 3, 4, 5 seconds, so and that just, are filtering in, and I have to do this balancing act of of not blowing the new people out of the water and making it like, oh, I'll never get this, to the people that are going like, oh yeah, here's the same old moves. But I'm finding that most of the time they actually kind of like that, because then they can review it, and I'll talk higher level concepts, and I'll tell the people who are new, like, this, I'm not really talking to you. You're still trying to figure out, how to serve tea. And
Yeah.
so, that kind of thing. And but one of the things I've done to combat that then is to, go is for these people that I know have the interest in how you refer to it, Robert, as proper Tai Chi. Um, I'll keep them after class and, say like, hey, punched out, this is not a YMCA sanctioned event. This is Russ just sharing what he knows, and we'll do some applications. We'll do some, I'll work more on their body mechanics, things like that. So, and give them more corrections than what I necessarily can do when there's, 20, 30 people in the room.
I will come to you in a minute, Robert. Russ has kind of nicely segued into the second part. The second part, what I wrote was getting stuck. How do we check to see if our beliefs in and practice of Tai Chi have got stuck? So that the things we teach, we believe to be, so that the things we teach, we believe to be not just correct, but immutable. And is that a good or a bad thing? Robert, you want to jump in? Please do.
Yes, what Russ was just talking about is very interesting to me, and that is, I found when I was a student in a lot of classes that the things that the teacher said to the more advanced students were like planting seeds that I would think about, and even though I knew I wasn't ready to do those things, some of these things came out years, sometimes decades later, that I understood them, having been exposed to them. And so when I teach a class, I have all levels of students, from people who just came in that day to people who have been with me 30 years, literally 30 years, and all together. And to me, it's a community, and I'll be talking about something. I try to add a little bit for the students who've just started, so that they have some understanding of the context, and but doesn't stop me from talking about advanced things. I want them to be exposed to it. And I'll say to them, it's like the measles. You have to be exposed to it a number of times before you get it. Don't feel you have to get it right away. But this is something that you may get at any point, and there's no time limit. It's not this business of, well, you have to do it 10,000 times, or you have to practice it for 10 years. No, you could get this right away. You can get this right away. And if a student asks me a question that I just answered the question, but a student will ask me the same question. Either they weren't listening or whatever it was. I'll never say I just mentioned this before and I'm not going to talk about it again. I'll answer the question again, but I'll add in to it things that expand it for the people who already heard the answer to that question. I'll modify it. I'll change the answer. I won't just repeat the same thing again. So I don't want to make that student feel bad, but I don't want to bore the other students. So I found, over the years of teaching physics, I've had that a lot. Not so much in Tai Chi, but in physics, students will daydream. And I understand that because I put in enough hours of that myself as a student. And so it helps everyone. The goal is to in everything I try to say, everything I say, I try to say it in a way where each level of student can get something out of it.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I mean, I've been this last week, the limited amount of teaching I've been doing, I've been immediately sharing with my students, and it wasn't something I was taught, but it was an insight that I got while I was practicing with another instructor, into the way that I had been teaching and had been doing grasp swallow's tail. And having played with it for a couple of weeks while I was out there and then coming back, it's just a little modification, but I thought, oh, I like that. I want to add that to what I do. I just saw an instructor doing something different to the way I do it, and I thought, oh, yeah, that resonates. And so immediately start sharing it. But like the course I was doing yesterday, one woman, Katie, it was her first Tai Chi lesson ever. The other two, a couple, Ken and Sue, have been students of mine for about 9 years. So obviously you are having to pitch things at different levels. And hopefully, of course, get it the right way round. I hope I gave Ken and Sue the complicated stuff and Katie the easy stuff. I think that's what I did. But the metaphor that I've used for many years, Steve, I'm sure 20 years ago will have heard me talk about Tai Chi as an onion, which is you take the brown bit off the onion and you've got this onion and it's, oh yeah, that's an onion. Oh, and then if you want to, you can peel another layer off and it's still an onion, but it's a slightly sharper, fresher onion, especially if you leave it on the side for a while. And Tai Chi is like that. Steve, I don't know if Dick ever did it to you, but Dick Watson used to come up to me and he would say, you'd be doing something and you've done it really well. And Dick would come up and he would go, that was really good. But when he said but, in the cartoons where the big weight is above the character and it's about to fall and squish them flat, that was the feeling you had for a second or two. And then what Dick would do is he would peel back a layer of the onion and he would say, well, you're doing that really well, but now if you add this in. And I think that's not the only way to go into the depths of Tai Chi, but I think definitely speaking to people in a way that resonates with them, that if they have tuned out, I certainly tune out from time to time, if they have tuned out to be able to accommodate that, I think that's absolutely correct, Robert. And I suspect most of us do that. John, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, I largely agreeing with Robert that I teach even new students, relative beginners, quite deep stuff. And I do this because I learned. I always say that the first night I did Tai Chi, I did this for 45 minutes. That was it. And the next week they let me do the next move. But nobody told me anything. But I tell even relatively new students fairly deep stuff, and I showed them on the basis that over the years it's been a sort of cascade of pennies dropping. Even now, I'm remembering stuff I was told years ago, and it's suddenly making sense or more sense. It just keeps on coming. So from that point, I say to them, this might not make any sense now, but in a few years' time, it will. So just do what I say. People seem to accept that. Um, uh, my, I was had this conversation actually with one of my latest students who's a second dan karate. Um, he's super, his sifu. He got fed up getting bashed, and his sifu recommended that he went off and, or his sensei recommended he went off and found a Tai Chi class. But I said that to him, and he said, "Yeah, that's why I come, because you know, I might not get it, but I know I will." And it's if we were just doing the moves, I'd probably have gone, be bored. So
Can I?
Yes, Virginia.
Me?
Yes.
Well, Ken's
Yeah.
had his hand raised for a while.
Sorry, Virginia, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I did. I did. And it's to do with the interactions between the students and their instructors. I would say some instructors are much more adaptable to new things and to the students' ideas than others. If you're very adaptable to Tai Chi moving on and your students moving on, you'll see how your students move, and some of their learning gets great, like inclines and leaps, and then they plateau. But that's how all learning goes on. What I would say is, one group I attend, the instructors frequently sort of update their techniques, and I think that's great because they're learning, but they're trying to pass it on. Another group I attend is that they're more talkative, and they discuss things like almost like playing with techniques to evolve more efficient movements. But they're probably a smaller group and probably more advanced in their Tai Chi. I think how you go depends very much on the instructor, but it comes back to the students. And some, like they evolve their ideas more slowly. And that might be because just the students want to move more slowly. I've only come across one instructor who was very rigid, but that was quite early when I was learning. As I say, I'm not an instructor, but that was probably because they wanted me to get a good basics, and not do, if you like, Tai Chi bad moves. I don't know how to say this. I say I'm not an instructor. I'm much less experienced than most of you, but I want to learn. But it does seem to me that a lot of instructors adapt how they progress with their students. Most of what I've met very few that are rigid.
Lovely. Thank you for that. Ken and Russ, you've both got your hands raised. Ken, I think you raised yours first. Yes, Ken.
I run into that problem of teaching different levels of people in one class. Most of the classes I teach right now are online, so I've got people from all over, different levels. I get together with my local guys, but mostly we're practicing to make each other better. So I teach, sometimes I'll teach a basic thing in my online class, like a silk reeling exercise. So we'll go through the basic movements for the people who are mostly beginner, but then I'll drill into body mechanics that make it, give it the relaxed power. Um, and, it, and that kind of leads into being stuck because I trained in Yang style for over a decade. And then I met my first Chin style teacher and he showed me things with body mechanics that blew my mind. And I drove away thinking, well, everything I've learned is empty. And it was probably because of my teacher, not necessarily the style. But I started in Chin style then and studied in the Chin Village variety through Chen Xiaolong, Chen Xiaoxing, uh, and their disciples. My teacher was a disciple of Chen Xiaolong. But then over 5 years ago, I told you how to interview this other guy for your podcast. So I did, and he came across so well. I did a private lesson with him online because he's in Berlin. But the detail I was hearing, I never heard from the Chen Village, anyone in the Chen Village. Closing of the legs, spiraling through the legs, and just amazingly powerful detail. And it makes you think, why isn't anyone telling me? There are so many teachers that just can't get it across or won't or forgot it. So now when I saw Qin Xiaowang, I think my favorite, the most beautiful performance of Tai Chi was when he first came to the US in 1988. He did this form that was so powerful and smooth and beautiful. Why don't any of his students move like that? How come none of the students can recreate that? It makes me think that's beautiful. They can't even apparently close into the qua. So that's why you have to keep
You just get
looking.
exceptional people.
You have to stay open-minded, and you've got to look for information and that's why we get into political silos and all this stuff and sports teams, which the Kentucky Wildcats can kick any of your teams and ass in basketball, by the way. But we get in these silos, you've got to break out of that. And I'm so glad that I've changed my religious views in my life, my political views, and I'm willing to change my Tai Chi views if it makes it better. And I think that's how you get unstuck.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting thing there, a couple of interesting things. One, I agree with you. Two, Virginia sort of said there are exceptional people. Yes, there are exceptional people, but there are also, luckily, very few, unfortunately, there are some exceptional teachers as well. Ideally, and those of you that have been on these groups with me for a time know that my attitude is completely random anyway. I don't care how good your Tai Chi is if you're my teacher. I primarily care whether I like you, whether you're a nice person. To me, the interpersonal dynamics, the fact that you are pleasant, trustworthy, have integrity, blah, 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 blah. All of that for me is more important because I I would like to be sort of, what is it, Superman or Super Saiyan or whatever the thing is, but I'm realistic enough to know my Tai Chi will continue to get a little bit better. I'm unlikely to suddenly become, the greatest in the world, mainly because Ken's ahead of me, I think, and Steve's angling for it as well. Anyway, sorry, I'm rambling as I always do. Russ, your hand is raised. Would you care to speak, sir?
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back a little bit and just kind of play off what everybody else has been talking about. Like Robert Chuckrow was saying, we're planting seeds. I follow your presentation style, Robert, of humor, and I'll just tell people that are, when I'm talking about more advanced concepts, I'll tell the beginners that are, fogging over, I'm like, don't worry about having to get this now, but I'm going to tell you this now so that 2 years from now, you won't say, well, why didn't you tell me that 2 years ago? I could have understood that, and then and then it came to me also, it hit home with me when like a month or so ago, I was rereading some of my notes from when I was first learning. I'm a William C.C. Chin stylist, but when I was first learning that style, um, that from my teacher, and I'm like, she said that back then, you know, and it went. I wrote it down, but it kind of went completely over my head. But the other thing, going back to Dr. Chuckrow's talking here, and one of the things that I do to get unstuck is read, and because then I get multiple lexicons, and then if a physics-based lexicon doesn't resonate with someone, I have other books that it's more, ferial and it's about your attention and things like that, as opposed to, the strict body mechanics. And so, you know, I can just shift when I answer the question and they go like, and then I can say, oh, and then there's this, and then they like, oh yeah, okay, I get that. So that's my biggest way of getting unstuck, is just continually learning, continually reading. And again, even if I read something and it's not like really teaching me anything quote unquote new, it gives me a new, fresh way to look at what it is that I'm doing and get my own practice unstuck from like, okay, I'm going to use that thought as I practice this week, as opposed to, same old, same old. So that's that's what I have.
That's interesting because there's two things for me that come out of what you've just said. Hopefully, I will remember both of them. The first one is I have a personal belief that you can't teach people, people can only learn. In other words, you throw stuff at people, but what they actually get is not necessarily what you threw out. It may be worse, it may be better, but and so for us as teachers, when we're trying to learn, which hopefully we all still are trying to learn, sometimes your insights will be direct. Somebody will say something to you and you go, oh yeah, thank you very much, add that to my toolbox. More often it's like, I don't know, rearrangement of neurons. Somebody slaps you upside the head and you kind of go, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way. And then 6 weeks later, or you wake up in the middle, I don't know, maybe I'm crazier. You wake up in the middle of the night and you suddenly think, oh, I know. And the brain has rearranged stuff. Oh, good. I'm glad one or two of you are nodding at me. The second, maybe just you're a bit slow and you're still nodding. Yeah, he's crazy. I don't want to know. I don't want to know which way. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Ken. The other thing is something I do quite often, not very often, but quite often, is I will discuss aspects of Tai Chi from both an Eastern metaphysical way and a Western pragmatic biomechanical way. The most obvious one for me is the thing about putting the tongue to the roof of the mouth or the gums behind the upper row of teeth, where I can talk, say, well, from an Eastern point of view, you've got, a conception vessel and governing vessel being linked. From a Western point of view, you've got this, and this happening. And I think that is good because I think it's good for new students because if they're sort of Eastern based, they get that flavor. If they're Western based, they get that flavor. And if they're neither of those, hopefully you show yourself as a teacher to not be unduly prejudiced one way or the other. I have trained with people who are so heavily into the esoterics of what they teach that it grates. I have also trained with people that are so heavily into the biomechanical aspects of what they teach that I find, this is a terrible thing to say, but occasionally I've found teachers boring. Robert, your hand is raised.
Thank you. When I taught physics, one student raised his hand and said, "I'm totally confused." And I said, my answer was, that's good, because you know that there's something that you understand, that you don't understand. There's something, and you want to understand it, that's also good. And that you're expressing it to the teacher who can help you understand it. And his answer was, no, this misunderstanding I have is pathological. But anyway, the thing about getting stuck is a lack of understanding, or could be a lack of understanding of how the learning process goes on. And by characterizing it that way and saying, I'm stuck, I'm on a plateau, prevents you from seeing how things are happening that you otherwise might not be aware of, that are part of the learning process. The things take a while to percolate through. And you may not see the results right away, but in our society, at least certainly in America, I don't know about the United Kingdom, I assume it's probably similar, there's this emphasis on getting everything right away. You order something from Amazon, it's on your at night, and the next morning it's on your front porch. I can't believe it. This business of you have to have it right away. And in school, the kid who raises his hand first is the one who has the answer, and everyone else feels stupid because they didn't get it. You watch Jeopardy. I don't know if you know about that program, but their questions, and a bunch of people have to answer the question right away, and then they get money for it. So it's based on capitalism. It's based on speed. Time is money, and getting it right away. This is not the way people learn, and we have this false way of understanding learning. And I remember one of my teachers when I was studying ninjutsu. He came in with rope and taught us knots for several weeks, maybe 3 weeks, and some students were asking, why are you showing us this? And he said, you'll see. And then after we understood knot tying quite a bit, I already knew that from Boy Scouts, he showed us how to use rope to tie people as a self-defense tool. Then he showed how to do it without rope. When 3 people are attacking you, he showed how he could wind them up and turn them into knots, and they'd be on the floor and couldn't get out of it. They had to figure out how to untangle each other from the knots that he put them in. just their limbs in knots, and that was what he was showing us, and that carried through to a bunch of other things. But people are too quick to feel that they have to understand something right away, and that if they're not, they're stuck. But it can also be that the teacher is withholding information, as we mentioned before. Either they don't know how to explain it, or they don't want to explain it, or they're purposely not explaining it. So when I was a student with Cheng Ching, everything was just relax and everything will happen. Just sink everything to the dantian. But these were people who were weightlifters. I was. Karate guys. They were all very strong and needed to release. And then he died. And now, 55 years later, these students are still saying, everything will happen if you sink your chi to your dantian. That's ridiculous. Tai Chi is so much more than that. And then, luckily, I had other teachers who showed me so many other things. Neijin, the Fajin, etc. All these different things that were missing from the original teaching. And these other people are stuck. And they're stuck because they never went to other teachers. And they never took it further than what God told them to do. And they thought of Cheng Min Ching as God. Big mistake. Big mistake.
Yeah.
So
I'm
that's the way I see it. I see these.
Yeah, no. The hero worship. Years ago, I flew into to Boston for drove in, I think, to Boston. I was doing a tour and I was in Boston for a few days. And the guy that was hosting me and showing me around Boston was a biochemist, something like that. Clever bloke. And he talked about his karate instructor as if this guy was the second coming of Jesus Christ. My sensei, he hadn't done any competing for years. And then last month he entered the national, championship and he got the gold medal. Wow, he's fantastic. Now, the instructor who I met and trained with was a nice guy. Don't get me wrong, a nice guy, good karate. But I think he broke wind just like the rest of us. Yeah, I think for me, the getting stuck thing is when we start to say things to our students without believing that they could. John, do you want to mute yourself if you're chatting in the background? That's okay. Don't worry.
Apologies.
No problem at all. I think it was a boring conversation. It wasn't one of your many girlfriends or boyfriends.
I took video instead of audio.
Yeah. Yes. So anyway, where was I? Getting stuck. That's completely buggered me, hasn't it? What I'm wondering about is, are there things that we say to our students? Are there things that we believe to be, that we present as being absolute truths that maybe are not? A guy on Facebook, I think slightly trolling, has been talking, or was talking a few weeks ago, about the whole thing about not allowing the knees to go past the toes, which is something I've taught for many years, which is you try and avoid the knees going past the toes. But he was saying basically, no, this is bullshit. You should allow the knees to go past the toes. You don't want to be a little old man and protect the knees at all times. And I kind of understand some of where he's coming from. However, I don't want to teach my elderly, new to Tai Chi people to do things that might damage their knees. So I'm still going to err on the side of caution in protecting my students' knees. But are there other things that I teach that I believe to be so, that maybe aren't, and maybe I'm not aware of my prejudice? And do we all suffer in the same way? Sorry, first of all, does anybody actually understand what I'm saying? Because I'm not
Yeah,
sure that it
Yeah.
to
makes
some extent,
right.
uh,
So let me just try
easy to
and
follow the
clarify
teacher.
it and small it down. Are the things that you believe about your Tai Chi, the detailed things that you believe about your Tai Chi, are they empirically true?
I'm coming in here just from 2 points of view. One, no, I don't think there's anything in my chi that I think Tai Chi is absolute. If anything, it goes the other way around. You sometimes get the imposter syndrome of, do I actually know anything that's true? It should continue to develop, and we should be open, whether it's the knee past the toe, whatever. Who's saying it? Why are they saying it? What does it mean to me? As you say, there's the health aspects. I now on in some of the exercises, scissor steps. Anyone who's had a hip or knee replacement, I just tell them not to do it, but I'll explain why. Nothing to do with martial arts or Chinese traditional medicine, just the mechanics of modern medicine. You're going to damage the joint that you just had put in if you do these exercises, as far as I understand. And have to put that caveat in, as far as I understand. I would recommend you don't do it. The continuing to learn or be open to learning, I think, is an important part of us standing in front of people and sharing what we wish to share. Without naming names, Robert, I think you'll know I'm talking about an extremely good practitioner who used to live in Sweden and came over to a Simon's invitation. And I believe when Simon had pointed out to him, but hang on, you're doing it differently to what you did last year. And he'd say, thank you, you noticed. He's learning, even though he's the sort of person I think of, one of the gods of knowledge of these arts that we do. He was still coming back and saying, yeah, but I'm learning. It's different, but it's for a reason. So no, I don't think there's anything absolute. At least certainly not for me. I'm still trying to get the basics. It's the imposter syndrome I'm closer to. I know nothing. But no matter what level we're at, and I had this discussion, I think you know him, Robert, Matt, over in Luton. I was talking to him on Friday, that the people that are considered to be the masters and the gods of these different martial arts or traditional Chinese medicine, they learned it from somewhere. That person popped his clogs and went away, and this person inherits that. They're the top dog now. But I'm sure they didn't take in everything. And if they did, they understood it a different way, interpreted it a different way, and teach it a different way. It's constantly changing. I think all we can do is be honest with ourselves, what we know and what we don't understand. I share certainly with my students, there's a lot I don't understand, and there are a lot of people around who know far more than I do. But what I do know, I'm prepared to share. And please question me, because that's how I learn. It makes me go away and go, hang on, yeah, you've got a good point there. So it should, I think, continuously develop and be questioned by all of us. That's from my little knowledge. Yeah.
I encourage people to become their own best teacher. That I can't really necessarily jump in there and say, oh, do I, feel this tension? Yeah, I can see it and, make some corrections, but, I encourage them to think about that on their own. And I also use the analogy of a painting party. People go to a painting party and they're given the same canvas, the same brushes, the same paints, the same instruction, the same subject, paint the elephant by the mountain, under the tree, and it's sunset. And every single one of them look just a little bit different. So, my Tai Chi looks different from my teacher's Tai Chi. Hers looks different than from her teacher's Tai Chi. His looks way different than his teachers, and his Chim and Ching's then looked way, 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 way different than what Yang Chen Fu did. So, it just it's an that's the art side of it to me.
Robert, you've raised your hand. Yes, sir.
Yeah. The criterion I use on this subject, which I love what people are saying, is to give a reason for. In other words, if I say, "Well, don't stick out your thumb this way," and I give them a reason, I say, "Look, somebody could just grab it and do that," and I show them how, and I tell them when the police. I pretend I now have torn off their thumb, and I say, "When the police ask you, ask me, who was can you identify the person who attacked you?" And I say, "Yes, just look for somebody who's missing this thumb." and that's a reason not to stick out your thumb. Or the knee going past I learned it as the root of the toe, not the tip of the toe. What's happening in your stance when you're doing that? Are you losing your root? Is your weight distribution or pressure distribution on each foot centered, or is it going to the front of the foot, etc. in a 70-30 stance? In a transition, it's going to be different because now all the weight's on that foot. And discuss it from a principle. Always look for the principles, being in the moment, non-action, non-intention, circularity, continuity, etc. And couch it in something that can be discussed and argued. And then a student can say, "Yes, but what about this?" Now you're going to learn something if you didn't think of it that way. And that can open up a whole lot of things for everyone in the class. So I don't tell a student, "Do this." I'll say, "If you do this, this is what my understanding is that happens. And you can look at it this way, or you can look at it another way." And one day, one of my high school students came in with a t-shirt that said "attitude problem." And I loved that because that described me when I was a student. That contradicts what the teacher says. Teacher says, "Never do this." When you never do that. The first thing I did when I'd go home is try it. Find out. I want to know the reason. It's not just do or don't, because every situation is different. Maybe there's a situation where you have to do that. And that might save your life to do that. But in other situations, it would be a terrible thing to do. So you have to have the criteria. And that's what I try to bring into it as much as possible for my own understanding it and for imparting understanding to my students.
Kind of like being in a store and you see "do not touch" on the sign. I have to touch it.
Yeah. Who has something else to say? Anyone? I haven't got I think we're kind of coming to the end of things for today anyway, which is fine by me. I think my grandkids are still around, so I can go and beat them up. No, they're actually one of my grandsons just started taking karate, so I better be really careful because he might beat me up. Is there anything anybody else would like to talk about, or shall we wrap it up?
Yeah. Good to see everybody.
Okay, in that case, good night and good morning, good whatever it is, depending on where you are. Thank you very much for attending and look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye.
Thank you for letting us in.